Tonight's one-on-one in 10 is former Prime Minister and UN Development Administrator Helen, who we cross to now to discuss the ramifications of New Zealand's decision to refuse recognising Palestine. Kia ora, Helen. Welcome to the show and thank you for being available to the Fourth Estate. Your democracy is grateful.
Thank you.
Helen, you are one of our nation's most important voices on international affairs, and we need your wisdom more now than ever before. By refusing to recognise Palestine, this government has put us on the wrong side of history, while critics argue the decision effectively has New Zealand protecting war criminals while ignoring genocide. New Zealand has a long history of making moral stands on the international stage. Why has this government betrayed our collective mana on this issue?
It's hard to know why they've let us down, Martyn, because none of the arguments they put up made any sense at all. They somehow equated Hamas still having some kind of control in Gaza from their bunker with the entire governance of Palestine. Now, Palestine has a government. It's called the Palestinian Authority, and it operates on the West Bank. So to refuse to recognise the state of Palestine because a part of the state of Palestine has Hamas still in some kind of control from a bunker just doesn't make sense at all. Look, the overwhelming majority of the world's countries have now recognised the state of Palestine.
Yes.
I thought that when Australia, Canada and the United Kingdom moved together, that might at least give the New Zealand government the cover it was presumably looking for. Heaven knows who Winston Peters consulted in New York. It certainly wasn't anyone who was making any sense on the issue. So here we are. It reminds me, Martyn, of that terrible time in the 1970s when African nations boycotted, I think it was the 1976 Montreal Olympics.
That's right. Because
New Zealand was there and the government of New Zealand's official position was to support apartheid sport. This is how bad it feels to me.
The government's argument, Helen, is that Palestine doesn't meet the benchmark as a state because they haven't had an election and don't control all their territory. How solid do you think that argument is?
No, not at all. Firstly, the Palestinian Authority does have elections, and the president of the authority has said that they are very prepared to go to elections again, and they've made a number of undertakings about improving governance. But I think it was Audrey Young in the Herald who said that the stance of the New Zealand government now almost equates with what you would do recognising a state, emerging 60 years ago. It doesn't take into account the current realities. Now, the current realities are that you have Israel, which has been continuously under Netanyahu blocking a two-state solution. So here we are recognising one state, Israel, but unlike most countries, refusing to recognise the other state, which would be in the two-state solution. Now, the elders grouping, which I'm a member of, we said many months ago that recognition should be seen as a transformative step towards the two-state solution.
Yeah.
Recognition shouldn't be dependent on two states materialising. So it was really to give momentum to a process, but this seems to completely elude the current New Zealand government.
If New Zealand won't call out our allies when they commit atrocities, what's the point of having a voice?
Well, what is the point of having a voice if you say nothing much when a genocide is unfolding? But look, the famine is there in Gaza City, which they're now trying to clear and destroy the remaining infrastructure of. They bombed a university campus in Gaza in the last couple of days for no apparent reason. The reason always given is, Hamas was there. Well, they've flattened just about every building in the place under that excuse that, there's not that many of them to be under every building. So, no, look, Israel is not an ally. It is standing now for a set of values which I think are abhorrent to most New Zealanders. Most people see Gaza burning, they see the suffering of the people, they see the starvation. The UN Commission, a very credible commission, which reported recently, was adamant that 4 of the 5 tests for genocide have been met. Now, in the end, the International Court of Justice will make a determination on whether genocide has occurred. But that judgment is not expected for more than 2 years. And by then, if you don't stop the bloodshed, you could have double the number of people dead that we see today, which is already atrocious enough. So at the Elders, we have talked about an unfolding genocide, and we know that in the Genocide Convention, it is the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide. If you see a genocide unfolding, as a state, you have a responsibility to work to prevent that.
Right.
And I see New Zealand doing far too little.
President Trump told US media that if Hamas did not accept his peace deal within 72 hours, that he would obliterate them. What hope do you think for the Palestinians of seeing a meaningful ceasefire in this terrible war right now? Do you think we'll get one?
So I think we're probably already past his 3 or 4 day limit. But I think that President Trump is very focused on this at the moment, and that's good. And I think what pushed him over the edge was when Israel bombed Qatar. Now, the US has a major Air Force base on Qatar. It regards Qatar as a good friend. And Qatar was bombed. They were trying to kill the negotiators for Hamas. Someone took them off, and looks like they didn't kill any of them at all. But they did kill some people, including, I understand, a Qatari national. Qataris were absolutely furious. So when President Trump had Netanyahu in his office a week or so back, he made him talk on the phone to the Prime Minister of Qatar and offer his apology. So I think Trump has had enough. He wants to be seen as someone who can bring about an end to disputes. If he can pull this off, good on it. Because only the United States
has the power,
can force Israel to the table. That's the reality. So there are talks going on in Cairo again today. Israel and Hamas don't sit in the same room, but they talk to people who scurry between the rooms. And there's supposed to be the deal being worked out for the release of the remaining live hostages and of the bodies. Now, what Hamas will be worried about is that if they give over the hostages and the bodies, that Israel will resume bombing. And it's going to take a lot of pressure from the US to keep Israel to the course on what follows the release.
Report after report after report from inside Israel shows their young men and women who have served in this appalling conflict are plagued with PTSD and waves of suicide. When you commit terrible violence, it impacts not just those you target, but it also damages the hearts and minds of those who commit that violence. What long-term hope is there to heal that level of pain?
So it's worth following on, say, Instagram, the brave voices of people like Breaking the Silence, who speak for former reservists who speak out and give testimony to what they saw and what they were required to do, whether in the detention centres or on the field or just in the war zones. There's another one, Combatants for Peace, which does a great job. The Haaretz newspaper is doing a great job of reporting that what's actually happening. And there is a lot of opposition in Israel to what is happening, very large marches of people. But yes, I mean, this will be a very, very scarred country after what has happened. There's been a number of Gaza wars before, but this is the longest and the most horrific.
The Lancet and independent researchers suggest the actual total death toll of the Palestinians may be in the hundreds of thousands from indirect violence, with almost all buildings destroyed, mass displacement and enormous emotional trauma. When do you think we'll get a true image of the wound this conflict has left on the Palestinians?
Well, let's hope at some point we do get a full reckoning. We may never know. You would have to have families come forward to say, in more peaceful conditions, to say, we haven't seen our brother for X years, X months, X weeks. There's been no body. We're reporting him as missing. So you really need a toll of those who have been registered as deceased, and of all the missing. And if you're missing now, you aren't alive in all likelihood.
Right.
So I would expect the death toll would most certainly exceed the figures that we see at the moment.
Wow. If a peace deal can be settled, what needs to happen immediately after that from the UN?
So what needs to happen is the place needs to be flooded with food and medical and other humanitarian supplies. Actually, Gaza used to have a well-functioning market system.
Yes.
Merchants would buy and the bakeries operated and so on. So the sooner you can get stuff back on that basis rather than people having to beg, the better. And then, of course, with the hostage release needs to go the prisoner exchange. Now, there's talk of hundreds of Palestinian detainees being released.
Yes.
Israel seems to be hanging out on a couple of the most senior ones. And one of them, Marwan Barghouti, a very senior PLO person, is seen by many as a potential future leader of the state of Palestine.
Right.
No wonder that they would let him go.
Right.
So really the pressure has to go on for people who can play a role. And he has the potential, in my opinion, and I have spoken to his wife and son on a phone call with the elders, he has the opinion to be the Mandela of Palestine if he comes out, because the current leadership in the authority, as we know, is quite elderly.
Yes.
This man is not so old, but he has been very badly treated in jail. We don't really have the full story about how well he is at the moment. So anyway, they need to release, a lot of people from those detention centers in Israel, including these potential leaders. And then,
yes,
so then you need to get on. Then you need to get on to Israel actually withdrawing. So in the Trump plan, there are different lines of withdrawal, and there has to be withdrawal from the territory of Gaza. Now it looks like Israel is still hanging out to keep some kind of buffer zone.
Yeah.
Now, what I saw the one time I went to Gaza was that the buffer zone is also what the agricultural land was in. Israel has destroyed the agricultural land, but if Gaza is to grow its own food again, it needs that land back.
Yeah.
But then, security for both Palestine and Israel depends on a peace process which is implemented. They got close to it after the Oslo Accords in the 90s. That solution is still sitting there, and that needs to be activated.
It would be remiss of me to have you on the show and not to acknowledge that you've just been appointed to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, a public-private partnership that does more than any other organisation to get vaccines to people in poor countries. It's reported that Gavi's vaccine saved a record-breaking 1.7 million people in 2024. That's 400,000 more lives saved than in 2023, enough to produce some 20 billion in economic benefits through reduced healthcare costs and healthier, more productive populations. How excited are you at the malaria vaccine and its potential to save lives?
So, I mean, this Gavi board is a big deal. This is a fund that's been set up 25 years ago. It's just had its 5-yearly replenishment. It raised $9 billion. It had hoped for 12, but these are tough times.
Sure.
America used to pay 13% of the budget, and it's paying nothing. But Gavi aims to get vaccination to every child. And it's done an incredible job. I think 1.2 billion children vaccinated since it began, an estimated 20 million lives saved because of that. There's still close to 15 million children out there who have had not a single vaccination dose, not for, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, you name it, the basic life course childhood diseases. So they are a top target. And then there's, I understand, probably another 5 million children who, while they've had some doses, haven't had the comprehensive loaded dose. So they're the top priority. But as you say, Martyn, there is a lot of excitement about this malaria vaccine. That's a game changer because you can do so much, with bed nets and so on. But bed nets wear out, and it's one thing to distribute once. You've got to keep doing it.
Sure.
So that's very exciting. I mean, another very exciting vaccine is this lenacapavir, which can, if administered, I understand, every 6 months, pretty much protect people from HIV transmission.
Oh, wow.
And administered to the adolescent girl in Africa, that would be a game changer because they are the most at-risk group of demographic group in the world from HIV transmission.
Finally, Helen, what role should New Zealand play in the healing process after this dreadful war in Gaza? Could New Zealand be a place where we fund peace maraes, where Palestinian and Israeli youth could come, meet and understand one another? Because internal polling suggests a majority of Israelis want Gaza wiped out altogether, while many Palestinians are still enraged by the occupation used against them. Isn't this a multi-generational wound they are facing? And should a peaceful country like New Zealand step up to provide a place of healing?
Well, I mean, it's a long way to bring people, obviously, but I think we should be looking at doing whatever we can to repair the damage that's been done. Now, UNICEF, for example, does a lot with psychosocial support for children and children under 18. So look at which of the agencies out there, could be Save the Children, could be any number of them, who is doing this kind of work. There have been over the years valiant peacekeeping efforts between Palestinians and Israelis. I've met the representatives of one which is called, I think, the Circle of the Bereaved or Family Circle. And that for years has brought together Israelis and Palestinians who lost children in these recurrent conflicts. An Israeli whose son was killed by Palestinians, a Palestinian whose son was killed by Israelis. These parents have come together to say, we've had enough. We want to work for peace. We're all victims here. We're all losing. So anything we can do to support the voices for peace and reconciliation, we should do. We've had a bit of experience with the Treaty of Waitangi processes and what we've done here. Far from perfect, of course, and under a lot of pressure at the moment. But we know the power of reconciliation for good.
Thank you, Helen. Your wisdom means so much in these really dark times. We look forward to speaking with you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Bye now.
Kia ora.